Morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk podcast. This is the United Show. This is Devil's Advocate. I'm your host, Keane, back from a lovely holiday in Tenerife, and I'm back here to host our Monday show here today. Joined by a very good guest here today joined by Shaun Connolly from Stretty News. We're here today to talk all things United. We're mostly going to talk about striker targets for January. We're going to talk about Alejandro Garnacho and his development, and also will he sign a new contract at the end of the season. And also, look, we'll chat about our Reds at the World Cup as well. So do smash the like in the video, do hit that subscribe button. And look, it's great to be back. Great to be back talking United. I thought, you know what, I enjoy my break on holidays, but I've actually, I'm not like you're grand relaxing and stuff, but when you see last minute winner, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it all week, I was absolutely disgusted. But look, we'll chat away about everything here this morning. First of all, Shaun, welcome to the show again. How are you today?
I'm doing good, my man. Thanks very much for having me back.
It's good, and it's a pleasure to have you back. Obviously, look, we're in a kind of a new international break, Winter World Cup. It's kind of a strange time to have a World Cup now. Look, I know we'll delve into that kind of later on, but obviously, the minute the international break came upon us, a certain man came out with an interview with Piers Morgan, Cristiano Ronaldo, and it's at the causing an awful upheaval within the fan base. And look, we've seen kind of the stuff he said, and look, we won't delve into that too much, but just first of all, just your thoughts on how this interview is after transpiring and Ronaldo's overall future at Man United, because it looks like there's no way back at this moment.
Oh no! I mean, I can't see any world that there's a way back in this. In terms of how I feel the interview, I mean, look, I suppose as I spoke with several people in the last week, I wouldn't class it as an interview in the first place. I don't think it was an interview. I think it was a premeditated conversation between two narcissists. I mean, what I'd really like to know, and I'm really interested in, is how long ago they actually filmed this, because this was filmed months and months ago, I would say. And
I think it was filmed after Spurs, I think, because they referenced the Spurs game, the substitution situation.
That's true, actually. Yeah. It's early in the morning. You'll forgive me that. But the with Ronaldo, I mean, I think he's put together a list of questions that he wants Piers to ask him. And Piers has done so and gazed at him lovingly for the duration of the entire thing. There was little snippets whereby I think Piers is shrewd enough to know that if he starts poking at him ever so slightly, he might get some sort of a response, a la calling Rooney and co rats. But all in all, I feel it was a discussion between two individuals that have very, very high opinions of themselves. And in terms of what Ronaldo has done, I think it's fantastic that he's essentially, will I use the word outing, or maybe just referencing what everybody knows in terms of the Glazers. But the fact that he's doing that, I mean, he's the most followed sports star in the world. He's obviously got a lot of pull, and everyone listens to what he says. So it's fantastic that he's going to come out and he's going to say something poor about them. I welcome that, absolutely. But then at the same time, it doesn't pardon anything else that has occurred. And it's gone several miles past being too much. He has tarnished what was a very, very strong legacy at the football club, and there is no way back. I know, as you touched on there a moment ago, it has created a divide in the fan base, but ultimately it doesn't take a whole lot for that to happen, particularly on social media. And what Ronaldo has done, he's going to have his cult followers, and I would like to think that there is a fairly staunch percentile of the fan base that are logical, that can see past this for what it is. It's a man that took a 90-minute interview, spent about 4 or 5 minutes speaking about the problems of the club, trying to draw in the listener, and then spent another maybe 10 minutes speaking about the tragic events that happened in his family, which I would never ever speak ill of.
Yeah.
But it's all set up in this platform to engage with the listener and get him on his side. And then it's maybe 70 minutes of just bashing the football club, bashing the players, bashing the manager, and essentially throwing dirt in your and my faces.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was. And like, again, I said it on Twitter the other day that, like, look, the fact that not even essentially just mentioning the Glazers, that obviously gets highlighted, and that's obviously a great thing, but it's nothing that, like, it was nothing that no one else has been saying, like yourself, myself, or Neville on Sky Sports, or whoever, Rio, or whatever other platform, like all he just basically said the same thing, that the Glazers don't care. Like, everyone knows that the Glazers don't care. Like, do you know what I mean? So every man and his dog knows that at the end of the day. But like, you undermine them statements when you come out and say you don't respect the manager. You undermine the statements when you're slagging off the chefs in the football club. You undermine that statement, when you're calling ex-teammates rats who actually helped him beat the player he is today. Like, when he calls Wayne Rooney a rat, I found that actually disgusting, because if you look at Wayne Rooney, look at Ronaldo's early time at Man United, Wayne Rooney sacrificed his game for Ronaldo. So Ronaldo can get them goals, get them assists. Rooney played out of position often the time for Ronaldo as well. And when I heard that, because obviously in my childhood I looked up to Rooney and Ronaldo. Like, of
course.
So I would lived off them. Like when I was watching United growing up, obviously Keane as well earlier on than that, but it didn't sit right with me that he talked about Wayne like that, especially when you actually put into context what Rooney actually said.
I was just going to say that to you. I was just going to say that. I mean, what did Rooney actually say? He said, look, he's inevitably getting old. It's going to happen, everybody, and it's I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I find it to be bizarre. And even at the point in the interview when he references the fact that a couple of weeks ago, Rooney's kids were there.
Yeah.
So it's not like
strange.
It's so strange. And the thing is, like, Wayne did nothing wrong. He just made a normal comment, and more so even sort of brought himself into that comment where he said it happens us all, it happened to me. And realistically, he obviously doesn't have too poor of an opinion of Ronaldo if he still has his children going over to the house to play with his kids, so I find it bizarre, absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it's strange. And I think that's where it hit many of us, because obviously them two, you'd like to think they were so close on and off the pitch. Obviously, you've seen the incidents that happened years ago and how they got over it and how they developed one of the best partnerships in the Premier League history. Obviously, Teva's part of that, but he went to City. I'm not going to give him the credit that probably he should have got during that time. But it didn't sit well with me. And then even with Gary Neville as well, Gary was just basically stating facts that United are a better team this season without Ronaldo. If you look at it, 25% of the games Ronaldo's played, we've won. 75% he's played, we actually haven't won. So, again, it's just weird. But yeah, the minute he slags off the manager and says he doesn't respect him, then I think there's no way back.
No, absolutely not. Particularly when the manager has done nothing wrong. And as a matter of fact, I would look at it, and if you try to take it like in bullet points, Keane, he had the tragedy that happened in the summer. He missed pre-season training. The manager acknowledged that and then refused to speak about it publicly because it wasn't his place to do so. Ronaldo comes back then and obviously has this opinion that because of the stature of who he is, he should automatically come back into the first team. It's been quite clear that not only for Ronaldo, take Casemiro, for example. Casemiro came to the club, was obviously lacking match fitness. And as well as that, McTominay was playing brilliant football. So we spent all this money on a prime central defensive midfielder. And how long did it take him to get into the first team? It took him maybe 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
So Ronaldo missed preseason. He's 37 years of age. He wasn't fit. And then when he did get an opportunity, I don't think he really tore trees out of the ground with the opportunities he was given. So he was getting an opportunity. He wasn't performing. And it wasn't just a case that he was getting 10 minutes. He was getting an opportunity where he was getting maybe 2 games. And then he wasn't delivering. And ultimately, when Anthony Martial was fit, Martial was able to come in instead of him and make more of an impact in a much shorter cameo. So Ten Hag obviously then had to endure what happened with regards to Spurs and City. I mean, I spoke about this with a good buddy of mine yesterday. And if you talk about Spurs, obviously he refuses to go on with Spurs. Now, this is a prime opportunity when you're playing a team that are beaten. You have an opportunity to get on the field, get a goal contribution, and ultimately boost your confidence. So he refuses to come on there. And then he moans and he whines when he doesn't come on against City, when the manager is just saying, look, we're beaten here. We are what Spurs are in the other game. We're completely defeated. And what is the point in me bringing you on the football field now? There is no point. It's not good for your reputation. It's not good for anything. So it's best if you sit it out. And then even after him walking down the tunnel, he gives him the armband. So he's been nothing but respectful to the man, in my opinion. Obviously, we don't know the intricate details of what happens behind closed doors, but from what we know, and especially even after what Ronaldo has said in the interview,
right there,
yeah, exactly. So Ten Hag has been a model professional in terms of how I view this.
Yeah, he definitely has. And I think, again, Ronaldo, I think I think he's probably at a point in his career, I said this the other night, that he's probably at a crossroads because he's coming to a realization there's a lot of stuff that's after happening off the pitch. And what that's ultimately after coinciding with, his decline on the pitch. And it probably, at this moment in time, it's probably a lot for him to process. I think that's probably why he's maybe acting the way he's acting a minute in terms of walking off, in terms of, feeling hard done by. And look, I can understand to a certain degree when there's things going on in the outside life. We've all had it. Sometimes it affects your work environment. Like that's quite tangible. That's possible. But it's just the way he kind of came out and say he doesn't respect the manager. I think that's where the line in the sand is drawn effectively.
Oh, definitely. And even what he said about Ralph Rangnick. Imagine how difficult, if his disrespect for Ralph Rangnick was that much, imagine how difficult a job Rangnick had. It was already hard enough for him coming into that position as an interim manager. Imagine coming in and you've got one of the greatest players of all time in the dressing room, basically looking down his nose at you, giving you this sort of opinion. You're not a manager. Why would I listen to you? You don't know what you're doing. You haven't done this before. You shouldn't be managing Manchester United. And then you've got young, impressionable footballers inside the dressing room. Because imagine at that time, you've got Jesse Lingard, you've got Dean Henderson, all these guys inside the dressing room that seemingly had bad attitudes. I mean, you further fuel this by looking at Ronaldo in him saying, I don't like to give advice. I like to lead by example. Now, what has he led by throughout this entire thing? He's led like putridly, absolutely putridly. And you're talking about a 37-year-old man who has been in a duel with Lionel Messi for his entire career. And he's ultimately declining. And then he's looking at Messi over in Paris, who ultimately had a difficult start. And I don't know whether that was down to him declining. I think this season has proved it wasn't a decline. I think it was probably
an environment thing with the whole thing with Barcelona as well last.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at him this year, and he's reinvented himself. And he's in a front three with Neymar and Mbappe. And he's in the twilight of his career. And yet he's still the standout player. So I think when you look at that sort of stuff, I think that probably eggs on Ronaldo a little bit more with regard to his frustration, with regard to maybe his decision-making ultimately in coming back to United when he probably had other opportunities for a cosmopolitan move somewhere to a slightly lesser club. Because let's face it, Paris Saint-Germain have a lot of money, they have a lot of star players, but they're not Manchester United, so... Yeah. I think a lot of that is playing into it. And ultimately, it's a petulant man-child that just cannot accept the way his body is going. That's all.
Yeah, and that's where, again, I think that's where the crossroads is, where he's at. And I think, again, he has to, take some time to reflect on, A, what he said, B, what he needs to do, and C, how he, I suppose, carries himself going forward in the public eye. Because I think, again, Ronaldo's Ronaldo. We all know there's some things in his game that won't change. But I think that at the same time, there's better ways to conduct yourself. And look, when you go to someone like Piers Morgan, look, I think from Ronaldo's side, he knew what he was doing going to Piers Morgan. He knew what he was doing, 110%. So again, it's like if he sat down with someone like, let's say, Andy Mitten, or he sat down with James Cooper, someone like that, and sat down and got all them points across, and they actually conducted a full, well-structured interview there, he would have came across a lot better. A lot better.
If he had welcomed somebody like Mitten who would cross-examine him. If he's saying, I've looked outside the window and the sky is red. And Andy said, okay, the sky's red. But what if it's blue?
Yeah.
And I'm just using red and blue as an example. No United City reference there, just colours. But, just have somebody to cross-reference what he's saying and somebody to challenge him on certain points. And maybe just say at a certain point, well, look, I can totally appreciate what you're saying. But do you think that maybe you have come across slightly poorly with this particular decision you've made? But there's none of that. That's why I'm saying at the very start, it wasn't an interview. And that's the problem with this. This is just, as I said, it's a spoilt brat just firing his laundry out in public. And I have a question for you. I mean, I've always looked at Ronaldo, particularly what happened at the Euros that time when he was pulling his manager on the touchline. Do you remember that when he was jumping around the place? I've always viewed Ronaldo as someone who's probably going to go into management himself. He'll want to be this sort of full circle guy who's won it all as a player and then goes and wins it all as a manager. Can you imagine being the owner of a football club, even considering bringing Ronaldo as a manager?
I know one man will probably bring him in as a manager. We've discussed him before, probably Todd Bowley.
Todd Bowley, yeah. Todd Bowley, I was only speaking to Mr. Dale O'Donnell about this yesterday, and when you're looking at these sort of prospective avenues where he could go, Bowley is a little bit crazy. I think that he might just sort of look at it and say, this could be a short-term solution, and it could be our Tom Brady. I think very similar to what the Glazers did in bringing him back.
Yeah. Yeah, it very well could be. And I made that suggestion on the show on Saturday night as well. And that maybe Todd Bowie would be the one to maybe bring Ronaldo in. When Ronaldo doesn't inevitably leave, I think maybe you're looking at places maybe like Qatar or Saudi Arabia, probably.
Do you think he'd go there when Messi is still playing in Europe, though?
He's gonna have no choice. What top club takes him?
What about Turkey? What about someone like Fenerbahce?
Maybe. They're not still in the Champions League, though, are they? Do they get through their group?
Well, whoever it is who's
That's why is it? Do they get through the day? Or I actually don't know.
Yeah. Well, realistically, with the clubs that have got through in the Champions League, no, there's no one has taken a punt on him. Maybe, as you said, maybe Chelsea. But then, I suppose so. It's a funny one, my man. It's a funny one, and God help the club that decide to take him on board.
Yeah, well, if he signs for Chelsea, the social media meltdown, I'm here for it. I'm just waiting to see certain individuals, like two of my good friends that come on the podcast, Evan and Shaun, they absolutely despise him. But if Chelsea sign him, I'm getting him on here, and I want to see all the backtracking in the world being done.
Look, I will lead the charge. I think Ronaldo and Chelsea is a match made in heaven, and I'm all for that. I'll drive him there. There's no problem.
Absolutely. And this kind of actually segues me into Shaun, what I discussed with you last night. Obviously, you do a lot of analytical stuff on Twitter, and you always look at football from a very broad view. I kind of want you to if you look at Ronaldo leaving now, obviously United need a striker. Even before Ronaldo was leaving, we needed a striker anyway. Sure. Because obviously he's 37 and Martial has his own injury problems, and Rashford is way better on the left. We all know that. But from your standpoint, who do you think would be a good kind of replacement in January? I know January is kind of a hard window and it's hard to buy. But if you look at kind of where we are, what we need, who do you think would be the ideal candidates to come in and be a striker for Manchester United at this moment in time?
Well, when you said this to me, I started looking realistically, not sort of like fantasy football manager. I looked realistically at it. And top of my list, and it doesn't matter whether it's January or whether it's summer, is Ivan Toney. I think Ivan Toney would be a tremendous acquisition for the club. When you look at Toney this season, he's got 10 goals and 2 assists in 14 Premier League games. That's astonishing. 12 goal contributions in 14 games for Brentford. And overall in the Premier League, he's got 22 goals and 7 assists in 49 games. It's astonishing when he's playing for a club of that level. And it's no disrespect to Brentford, but they're shooting well above their hip. So when I look in January, what do Brentford want to accomplish this season? Brentford didn't start out this season thinking we want to secure European football. Brentford wanted to further establish themselves as a Premier League side and maybe move towards a mid-table Premier League side. So if Brentford got a fine chunk of cash in January and they were able to invest it back into the club in some way, shape or form, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do so. If you're looking outside of the Premier League, I mean, I think there's one name in Holland that everybody is very, very curious about in terms of Cody Gakpo. And what Gakpo is doing this season is extraordinary. Now, he's 9 or 10 goals and 11 or 12 assists in 14 games. I think he's got some 21, 22 goal contributions in 14 games, which is astonishing. But then at the same time, this is something that I said months and months ago when Ten Hag first came in, and obviously we've been linked with half of the Eredivisie. I think the Eredivisie as a whole is very, very comparable to the Championship, the English Championship. There's a couple of very good clubs in the Eredivisie, but by and large, there's not a whole lot of great clubs in that division. Now, there's some fantastic players, but as we've seen in years gone by, obviously we don't have to look too far in terms of Memphis to see how a player can absolutely run amok in that league and then come and struggle in a different environment. Obviously, we're in very, very early days thus far with our own acquisitions, but they've proved to be very successful. I know Anthony is getting maybe a lot of... He's got some critics or people that he hasn't yet convinced. I think Anthony's been great. I think he's growing game on game. And the thing is with Anthony, I think Anthony has so much more to go. He's only scratching the surface. I don't think he's even scratching the surface on what he can do this yet. You look at our Argentinian butcher. He's arguably the player of the season in the league, let alone Manchester United. And Gakpo, for what we would have to pay, I don't think we'd have to be paying anywhere near close to 100 million quid for him. This is a guy who can play anywhere across the front line. I don't know, is he an out-and-out striker? I think he's more so a player in that similar ilk of Rashford, where he's maybe a little bit more comfortable cutting in from the wing. But I think he can play as a striker, and he has played as a striker. I could go on and on and on about different players that I think, but I'll give you 3 for the basis of who I think is actually feasible. And I'm sort of torn, because if I'm talking about January, I think one is more so than the other. And even though I'm not entirely convinced as to how he would do in leading our line, given his situation at the club, I'm going to go for Atletico Madrid. I'm going to say a club that are out of Europe, a player that has fallen out of favour with his manager in João Felix. I know he's quintessentially a false 9 more so than a striker, but I think he could bow in very well in that front system that Ten Hag plays, because he's a very good presser. Even though he's not the most physically imposing in terms of how you view him, he's actually very good on the ball, and he is very feisty and very physical. And given where he's from, I think he'd fit in very well with the culture that's at the club as well. And he's fallen out of favour with Simeone. He's in and out of the team. I know he's not been the most prolific in terms of what he's done in Madrid. Do you believe now? It's hard to believe it, because it seems like it's only a few months ago. He's closing in at 100 games for Atletico Madrid. He's played 94 matches for Atletico Madrid. And in that time, he's hit 38 goal contributions. So it's not necessarily prolific, but then that's where he's been operating. I think
do you think it's a system thing with Felix at Atletico Madrid, because obviously like Simeone is a very kind of defensively moving manager.
Exactly.
And I think maybe it's similar to when we had like Rashford and Martial under Mourinho, where they kind of had the shackles on them a bit, and then we've seen under Solskjaer how they got a lot better, and when they were given a bit more freedom, we've seen them express themselves a bit more. Do you think, let's say Felix left Atletico Madrid and came to Man United and played in a completely different, more proactive system, we may see a better João Felix, considering he would have relationships with the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Diogo Dalot?
Oh yeah, 100%, and even goes further than that, because I think we're developing this South American flair. And often when I think of South America and I try to get this sort of tribalism and sort of get a comparative in Europe, you're thinking about Spain and Portugal, but particularly Portugal. I think there's something, because Portugal is like my second home. I was married in Portugal, and I love the place. And it's not because of the man we were previously talking about, is all by the way. But I think João Felix could come into that system and he could feel right at home. And I think he has all of the attributes. And he's extremely young. He's only 23. Like, people forget this. He is only 23 years of age. And for as long as I will continue to follow football, I will never quite understand how he got the muscles in his neck to move in that way to score that header against us. Yeah. When he got in front of Maguire, and how he managed to get his head to that ball, it really showed a different element to his game. So I think he's great. But ultimately as well, there's an honourable mention for another player who I think it's only a matter of time before he bursts onto the major scene, is Jonathan David. And I think Jonathan David is exceptional. And when you imagine he's playing for a side that are in the same league as Paris Saint-Germain, with that front line that they have, and he is competing with those guys for his statistics. 15 games, 9 goals, 3 assists. Tremendous. He's only 22 years of age. He's a year younger than João Felix. He's fast, he's strong, he's technical, can finish on both feet. I think he's a brilliant signing. I just don't know, would January be a possible acquisition for him? Yeah. I look at the other 3 guys, and I think it might be possible. Cody Gakpo, probably the least of the 3. But if we were lumping money at a replacement in January, I think Ivan Toney or João Felix.
Do you think maybe, like, we've had a lot of controversy, with a lot of like strikers at this football club in the last 12 to 18 months? Do you think United are maybe looking at that situation with his gambling, I suppose, allegations at the minute, that may be a hindrance towards maybe getting him in January, and maybe it may more so maybe a summer transfer, considering the pending situation that may happen there?
I think it's definitely possible. It's disappointing to read that. I mean, it's quite clear. It's quite clear that there's stipulations in place for professional footballers. I don't understand why it's so difficult to adhere to. But anyway, I mean, I'll not make a pass on that until any judgment is actually passed on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do feel, though, that in the context of the 4 players I've named, Tony is the eldest. Like, he's 26 years of age. But he has got every attribute that I think fits into that Ten Hag system. Because when you look at Ajax, okay, Sebastian Haller came in at Ajax. And this is a guy that obviously was very limited in what he did in West Ham. Now, that's, again, could be a result of the system that was played at West Ham, because he's gone to Ajax and now he's at Dortmund. And I wish him the very best in terms of what's after happening to him after.
Yeah.
He seems to be making a positive recovery, which is fantastic. But how effective was he in that front line? And it's as this outlet, as a kind of a target man who allows the wing players to actually get into the game. Not only can Tony do that in abundance because he's very good at playing with his back to goal, but he can score. As I said, 12 goal contributions in 14 games in the Premier League speaks leaps and bounds, particularly when he's got around him. But yeah, I think with the controversy and everything that's gone off the field, maybe that might play into it. But ultimately, I suppose, what charismatic forward in world football doesn't bring a bit of an ego with them as well, you know?
Yeah, I suppose you look at the forwards we've had in the past. There's always been a bit of something, whether it's Rooney off the pitch or Berbatov just being the coolest man in football.
Yeah, yeah.
Like literally, we've had. Yeah, when you actually think about it, Tevez had his issues with his agent. Cantona was just an absolute nut job. Like,
Sure, even go to the diluted, to the vanilla, like in Teddy Sheringham. Teddy Sheringham driving his Ferrari into the training ground. Like, you know, it's just, we've always had this. Or Dwight York. Dwight York was like, you think he's such a shy and assuming guy. That fella oozed arrogance, you know, and I think it's necessary. I think of those players that I mentioned, Jonathan David would probably be the vanilla, because he was born in America. He obviously represents Canada, and he's doesn't seem to be an overly flamboyant sort of figure. But then you never know. He might come to the big lights of Old Trafford and it might all change.
Yeah, he might start hanging around a few of the boys, and look, you might see him dancing on the pitch or something. Even though Jesse Lingard isn't there anymore, so we won't see any dances.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, like I think Ivan Toney is a very good player. I think another one who I actually quite like is Tammy Abraham as well.
Yeah, good player.
Yeah, he's someone who I think as well could do something similar to Ivan Toney as well. Now again, I think Chelsea have the first refusal on. I think if Roma are open to selling, I think there's something there.
The problem that I have though with that, how much, like realistically, how much do you think we're getting Ivan Toney for if we do get him? We probably get him 40, 50 million.
Yeah.
You get Tammy Abraham, you're probably talking 100 million quid.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they're similar players, and you probably get Toney for half of it. Like, I think that's and again, he's been in the Premier League more recently, so there's definitely room for either one of them. But I think there's just Ivan Toney probably right now, financially and just system-wise, probably does fit that system the best. I'd love Osimhen, but there's no way in hell we're probably going to buy him, like, especially in January. That's probably more of a summer transfer if we get one or two more players off the wage bill.
It's kind of like that marquee sort of signing, really, with him, isn't it?
He's kind of that Galactico-ish signing, like, and he's a brilliant player, by the way. I love watching him in Champions League, especially, like, look, watching what he done to Virgil van Dijk and bully him. Like, not many forwards do that to Virgil van Dijk. Anthony Martial has done it on occasion. We've seen him do him a couple of times, so it's very rare you see him get bullied. So
maybe we should just invest the money in bubble wrap and just tie it around Tony, and just maybe Anthony and Martial, like, maybe he can keep himself fit for at least 3/4 of the season, and then we don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, to get him on the old Ronaldo gym plan that he went on at 21 years of age at United with Rennie Mullenstein and the lads. Maybe he might make his body stronger, no more injuries. But we're talking about a lot of young players, Shaun, in terms of like their experience of football. But there's one that's come through our academy, I think, that's been an absolute breath of fresh air. Alejandro Garnacho. What do you make of his kind of introduction into the first team, considering, like, Bruno actually came out a few weeks ago and said, like, he had problems with his attitude at the start of the summer during pre-season, and he seems to come in, he seems to be kind of taking everything in, and he's been a very good impact player as of late. What do you make of his kind of introduction to the first team?
I think it's been brilliant. I think you summed it up as a breath of fresh air. It's a throwback to Manchester United of old, particularly with the way our last game ended, with this young, talented player coming off the bench and scoring in Fergie time. And it's everything that this football club is about. I'm a little bit surprised. I follow the U team. Okay, so like, I would report the U team for years. So his talent is obvious. You get these certain players when they come through the U teams, like Pogba back in the day, that they're so much better than the boys the same age as them. and then they have to maybe make that transition into the senior side. And some of them obviously fail in doing so. I thought it was going to be a little bit more difficult for him to get used to the physicality when he came into that senior squad. But he has been so good, and he has taken to it. It's like that old saying, if you're good enough, you're old enough.
Yeah.
Because he has just come into it. He's taken his opportunity. And I'll touch on the attitude thing in a moment. But in terms of what he has put in on the field, it's been largely positive, largely brilliant. I mean, he's after winning Player of the Month for a reason. I know maybe in his first few cameo roles, you could see that maybe he was neglecting his defensive duties. And that's when I was just looking back at the game thereafter. Against Aston Villa, for example, when we got thumped by Villa that day, Matty Cash just had his way with him on the back. And ultimately, I think Ten Hag made reference to that actually after the game, that his role has been very good, but he needs to apply himself both in the attacking phases and in the defensive phases. And since then, since he's been on, he's tracking up and down the field, and he's obviously taking that on board. So when people want to critique his attitude, maybe he does have a bit of an attitude, yeah, but at least he's taken. You do, and at least he's taken the feedback and constructive criticism on board to be able to apply it in the game. His talents are there for all to see. Let's talk about the ball that he gave to McTominay. Exceptional. That's David Beckham would have been proud of that. And then you're talking about how he picks up the ball on the halfway line. He plays a 1-2 with Eriksen. And the burst of pace that he has with the last yard to get in front of the defender and then finish with the left. It's just, I think it's safe to say he's one of the hottest, if not the hottest prospects in world football at this moment in time at his age. And anybody that would go against that would just probably have an issue with Manchester United. Because if you can't look at that footballer and say there's something very, very special about him. I know you got the likes of Endrick and all now who look phenomenal. But Garnacho is definitely in the same breath as that, without any shadow of a doubt. And I saw this morning actually as well that United are seemingly confident in securing a contract from him. So it looks like he's going to be tied down contractually, which is fantastic. So may it persevere for a long time. But in the context of arrogance, it's like we touched upon a moment ago with all of those number 9s. You have to have a certain level of arrogance in you to succeed at the top level at Manchester United. And if we can have a guy that will apply himself in training, okay, he's probably going to get in trouble here and there. I mean, we had it from more than one credible individual during pre-season that Garnacho was one of the people that missed several meetings, and that's why he didn't feature as much as he did. And look, he learned the hard way. He was going to get a lot of game time in pre-season, and he didn't. And then it took him a long time to break through into the first team. But when he got his opportunity, he took it with both hands, and we have a real player. It's a good thing that we have at the moment, because we have an absolute abundance of left-wing players. And that's a real problem, but it's a problem that we'll happily take.
Yeah, like, look, depth is always a good problem. Like, if you look at the moment, like, if you're talking about this left wing, we've Rashford, we've Garnacho, so if Jadon Sancho can play there, Martial can play there if needed. He's played there and done a job. Like, we've that many players, and that's not even taking into consideration Anthony Elanga as well, who can also play there as well. Like, we literally have so many players who can do a job there. So I think depth is not an issue there. But like, the other way I look at it as well is, it's great to see like we're still adhering to our traditions of giving you a chance, and again, I just want to see us tie him down, because he's someone who I think can reach new levels. And he has a great manager in Ten Hag, who has a great record with bleeding in young players. You look at him at the players at Ajax, so young players like Donny van de Beek, and he's having the struggles at United right now, but he was brilliant there. Ryan Gravenberch, Jurriën Timber, just to name a few, players who he's brought in and done quite well under. So I definitely think, having Garnacho as the one of the superstars of the team. Yes, he's young. Yes, look, he's going to be raw. There's going to be mistakes along the way. Like, look, we've seen young players come into the team, and yes, they've shown, but also sometimes they might be a bit raw. But that's expected when you have a young player, and he's still learning. And then when you're learning your craft off players like Bruno Fernandes, Rafael Varane, Casemiro, David De Gea, he has great characters there who will help his progression, and maybe tell him along the way, like, look, don't do this. that'll piss off the manager, or do this thing in training. Like, I think if there's anyone in the team in this squad who can definitely be a great role model for him, I think it's Bruno Fernandes. I think his leadership skills this season has really shown. And there's one thing about Bruno I always love is he takes accountability for the team's performances or individually himself. And I think we've seen him really shine through when Harry Maguire hasn't been on the pitch as club captain this season. When Bruno's taken on that mantle, he's done very, very well as the captain of the team. So I think definitely, he has the right characters there at the moment. And you mentioned a few minutes ago in relation to João Felix in terms of the South American culture, almost that's right now. He blends right into that, So I think definitely Garnacho is in the right environment for his development. I think he's a player who can definitely make the difference in the game. Look, that's shown in the Villa game, that's shown in the Fulham game, and even I was at the Sheriff game a few weeks ago. Like, he was absolutely breathtaking. He's skinning everyone. He almost, like, I hate to say it, but I said it when I was at Sheriff game. He reminds me of young Ronaldo against Bolton that day, when literally he was just like everyone was off their seat. Like, you just knew he was going to do something exciting. And at Manchester United, if you look at post Sir Alex, Shaun, we haven't had many players like that who have got us off our seat. Yes, we've had good players. We've had, if you look at Louis van Gaal era, we had multifunctional players who would do a job in the system. But it's been very rare we've had players who've got us off our seat. Now, we've had Rashford. We've had Adnan Januzaj maybe do when they burst through, that they gave us that initial kind of feeling of getting us off our seat. But I kind of get that feeling with Garnacho that he's going to be something special. And, I just hope that he can continue in this vein.
Oh, I agree totally. And that's what Manchester United is all about. You want to have players that can get you off your seat, that can have you oohing and awing and cawing at these skills. And that it's like when you're training young players in grassroots. And I've always been a firm advocate for encouraging players who have the confidence to try skill moves and to display their flair, just to keep doing it. Because ultimately, it's very easy to get bogged down in this understanding that football should be played in a certain way and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. When ultimately, I have always applauded the likes of Neymar for being massively overconfident and egotistical with the football, because that's what you should be able to do. And at Manchester United, we want to have wide players that terrify the fullbacks. We want to have wide players to get the ball, take their man on, that will do that skill. That's why I hope, and I'm just going to touch on this, I hope for every single game Anthony plays for Manchester United, that even if he doesn't need to, that if he starts pirouetting with the football, I hope he keeps spinning around with the football. And that is the sort of stuff, because this is their trademark. We want players to be arrogant. We want players to have charisma. And Ronaldo touched on it in his interview, that he said people like him because he's charismatic. We want charismatic footballers at the club, but we want them to be charismatic with a football, not in front of a microphone off the field. And Garnacho has got the trademark of a player that can set the world alight. And this is what Manchester United deserve. This is what the fans deserve. And for a fella that young to come in, 70-odd thousand people inside in the stadium, and it just doesn't faze him. It's like he's playing with his friends down the park. And that's when you know you've got someone very, very special. As you said, it's like Ronaldo in the early days. Ronaldo, I feel when Ronaldo came to the club, he was very raw. I don't see the same rawness in Garnacho. Garnacho is almost a level past, and this isn't diminishing what Ronaldo was. I'm not in any way, shape, or form doing it. But I remember being in the ground when Ronaldo first came, and you're seeing this player that frustrated you because he always tried to do the outlandish, and it worked maybe 1 out of 5 times. But at the same time, you're saying, well, look, at least he's trying, and he's trying, and he's trying, and eventually these are going to come off if he keeps trying them. And eventually they did come off. Garnacho has come to the club, the first team, I should say. And Garnacho is trying these, and they're coming off 1 and 2 times. So I think we have an extremely special player here. And hopefully, as you said, we can tie him down. And as I said, reports this morning are suggesting that we will tie him down. And I hope the contract lasts for a very, very long time, and that he's happy to stay in Manchester, and that he's taken to the rain, and that he's embracing it. And maybe it's warm rain in Manchester, and he might like that.
Yeah. Look, we all know the Manchester weather sometimes. Sometimes. But yeah, look, hopefully it's a David Moyes-esque 6-year contract or something they give him. It'd be handy, but I'd love to see him stay. there was something about him when I was watching the youth team last season. Him and Charlie McNeil, like, for me, were just breathtaking. Both of them were just brilliant. And just seeing how Garnacho has played that same way in the first team and not phase him, it's brilliant. And yeah, look, when you're getting called up for Argentina at his age and getting to play alongside Lionel Messi, I know he's not gone to the World Cup, but he was called up a couple of months ago. When you're learning from players like that too, and you're being called up at that age, when you didn't even, you had a couple of minutes of first team football against Chelsea and that kind of cameo appearance that he had, I think that speaks volumes and how highly rated he is. You consider Argentina's attacking talent that they do have, but yeah, look, I agree. He seems like he's going to be that enigma. I just hope that he can be our enigma at Manchester United.
He will.
But Shaun, obviously, look, it's the World Cup.
Is it?
There's a lot of it is. We have obviously quite a few Reds in the World Cup playing for multiple different countries. Before I get your thoughts on the World Cup in a generalized sense, who would be kind of who of all the players from our club that are gone to the World Cup, who are you most excited to see play?
Who am I most excited to see play? I hope Bruno Fernandes outshines all of his teammates, and it'd be nice to see Diogo Dalot really stamp his authority as a fullback if that can happen at an international level. I know Martinez hasn't yet established himself as a regular for Argentina because they've been on this astonishing unbeaten run, which has lasted for...
It's weird. Mendy's been unbelievable for him.
The thing is, they haven't been beaten in 3.5 years, Keane. So I can understand a manager's perspective of, if this is definitely not broken, so why would I try to fix it? And that hurts me because Martinez is just exceptional and I cannot wait till he gets in there. So if he gets any game time, I'd love to see him, obviously, to set the world alight. But Christian Eriksen, Bruno Fernandes, I mean, I suppose with all the slack he's got, I'd like to see Harry Maguire have a good tournament. It'd be good for his confidence. Luke Shaw, I mean, I'm excited for all of them. But I suppose if I had to pin down one, I just have a special place in my heart for Bruno Fernandes. I think what he has done for the football club since he has come is tremendous. I don't understand why there's a proportion of people who have taken a dislike toward him. And I just love him. I love him. I think
I can find that for you, Shaun. The reason why people dislike him, there's a certain cult online that were anti-Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And they hated Bruno Fernandes because Bruno Fernandes was just unbelievable in Solskjaer's time, and they just attached their hate for Solskjaer to Bruno Fernandes. Then there's this Donny van de Beek tribe out there that think he's the world's greatest footballer, and look, we've seen in the last couple of weeks that isn't the case. But yeah, look, it's unwarranted hate when he's clearly our talisman, and he's someone who I think can even get better under this manager as well. I think there's levels for Bruno.
Bruno is sensational. Bruno is without question, Bruno's world class. People seem to get upset when he misplaces a pass without realizing that his type of player in that real advanced playmaking position, fair enough, he might misplace 3 or 4 passes. Look at the amount of key passes he creates in a game. Look at the amount of assists, opportunities that he creates. And then look at the goal contributions. It's astonishing what he does when he is on the field. So I suppose what I would say to anyone that can't appreciate him is I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. That's the most articulate way we can put it in terms of Bruno Fernandes. But yeah, look, I think for me, Bruno will be one. I think Casemiro, I just love watching him play. He's just he's a throwback, isn't he? To that kind of classic
Rolls Royce.
Yeah, Rolls Royce midfielder. He really is. Yeah, and I agree with the Harry Maguire thing. I think if he had a great World Cup, it could be good for us, especially when you consider Rafael Varane's struggles with injury. If Maguire can have a good World Cup and come back into the United team, let's say if Varane does get injured again during or after the World Cup, that Maguire can come in and slot in and they'll do well beside Martinez. Because I think at the moment, obviously, if you look at it, Martinez, why he's undisputedly our first choice centre half, then we obviously have to wait to see if Varane can stay fit. But yeah,
Lindelof, I think probably at this moment in time, Lindelof is the third choice defender. And as much as I would like some sort of caveat fairy tale story for Harry Maguire to turn himself around, I can't see him being content with being a 4th choice defender at the club.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe what you're looking at is him having a good tournament to be able to get the highest transfer fee for him. I would like what you're saying. It would be fantastic if we had that ability to have a player of his obvious talents, but I don't know, is there a way back for him at the club at the
Yeah,
moment?
it's a struggle. It is a
Mm,
struggle for Harry at the minute. But I think with him, like we've seen him how well he's actually done the United shirt. Now we've seen how poorly he's also done. But if you actually look at the
mm,
games he's played really well, he's been a good leader on the pitch. He's like I looked at that 2021 season, like
mm.
he was brilliant, and he carried that form into the Euros. And Luke Shaw similarly as well. I think both of them are two players who are fantastic. So like on their day, and I hate using that phrase, but
I
when
know,
they are on
I
their day,
know.
they are good players. But yeah, Sean, just finally, just to wrap up, obviously, like, look, there's been a lot of controversy in terms of Qatar obviously getting the World Cup and all the situations surrounding it. Obviously, England are going playing Iran today, the opening game of the Cup at 1 o'clock. And we've seen obviously England, like Harry Kane and Co are going to wear the One Love and the signs for the game. What do you make of this crack that they're trying to sanction the England players and similarly the Wales players who are going to do that? Like considering like we're meant to be in an open society and we're seeing obviously, FIFA not taking that stance.
Well, unless something has changed since we've been talking, it looks like the 7 captains of the 7 countries that are planning on wearing these armbands could very well receive yellow cards before kickoff. I haven't been looking, I've obviously been here, but prior to coming on, that's what it looks like, that FIFA were more so edging towards the likelihood of booking these players before the game even started for wearing a rainbow armband. And that in itself, there's nothing to even say about it. It's preposterous. It's absolutely preposterous, and everything about it is preposterous. Everything about the tournament is ridiculous. Like, I live for football, absolutely live for football, and to think that I didn't watch the opening game of the World Cup yesterday, I never thought I'd say that, and I didn't. I didn't watch the opening game of the World Cup. It was impossible to miss the VAR incident because it was all awash over the internet. But I didn't watch the opening game of the World Cup, and I have no interest in it. I've no interest. They've taken the beautiful game, they've destroyed it. Even look at what they've done to the fans. The 2 days before kickoff, they do this U-turn and tell them there's going to be no alcohol sold. And you've got Danish reporters a week ago coming on and trying to conduct live television, and there's fellas in golf carts coming around, jumping out of the golf carts, putting their hands in front of the camera, telling them they can't film in this particular area, even though they have a pass that they're allowed to film. You've got the thousands of migrant workers that have died, that they're shipping in from poor countries and paying them pennies to put together stadiums that are going to be deconstructed as soon as the tournament is over. The humanitarian issues are disgusting, and I'm not going to groundbreak anybody listening to this by telling them, because everyone knows about it. But it really just sort of sums it up this morning when you're talking about England kicking off the opening game of their tournament and Wales kicking off the opening game of their tournament. And the focal point is, will their captain get booked before the game even kicks off? It's just disgraceful.
Yeah, it's absolutely scandalous. And look, when you look at the way FIFA have been running, like Gary Neville said it quite rightly. Look at the people in the world at the moment. If you just generalize this, people like Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Sepp Blatter, all these people are heads of organizations that haven't a Scooby. Like they're divisive people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the human rights issues in Qatar, when you look at obviously people like journalists getting almost nearly attacked live on air, and then you look at like fans getting duped after buying their tickets, saying promises made, it'll be an open culture, you can go out there and do what you normally do as a football fan, that gets taken away from them. Like you see, even the RTE presenter had a black eye yesterday, as well. Like there's what's going on out there at the minute is it's unacceptable. And it just takes away kind of the festival. Like the World Cup is obviously the biggest stage, obviously aside from the Champions League in terms of football. It's meant to be a month of festival of football, and all the best players from all the countries, coming together and creating a good spectacle. But like when you see the corruption, and when you see even yesterday, like you look at that VAR decision. I wonder how many brown envelopes are handed for that. Like when you look at that
Even,
situation as a whole.
and even just look at it yesterday. You have Infantino sitting down beside the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia trying to get the World Cup for 2030. And then you have Infantino sitting down publicly showing that he's sitting alongside the Prince of Saudi Arabia. So if that's not an indication as to what you can expect.
Yeah, it's just one of them, Sean, where sports washing, I think, as a whole, like if you look at the sport in the last couple of weeks, UFC, Abu Dhabi, Formula One, Abu Dhabi, World Cup, Qatar, like it's something in the world at this moment in time. Like boxing is the same, like boxing events have been put in these countries as well, where really and truly, you look at some of the events where, let's say, if you look at some of the big UK fights at the moment, they're getting thrown into Saudi Arabia, like the Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury fights, etc. And then you look at this, like there's a lot wrong with it, and morally it's incorrect, but it's something that, look, yourself, myself, no one can control at this moment in time.
We're not going to solve it in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely not. But on that note, Shaun, look, we will wrap it up here for this morning. Thanks very much for coming on. Last quick fire question for you: who's winning the World Cup? Despite all the bullshit that's going on, who's going to win it this year?
I can't look past South America, so I'd say Brazil or Argentina. If I had to pick one, I'd say Argentina.
Argentina, we're going to see Messi win it. Oh, damn. To be fair, I had either Brazil or Spain. Something about me with Spain. I'd like to see Spain win it, but I think that with the young players they have, I think it might be a tournament too early for him. You may see maybe the Euros may be a bigger stage for him, but yeah, I'd probably say Brazil. And I would like to see Fred come back as a World Cup winner. That'd just be poetic justice. And him coming back as a World Cup winner, even though, look, he's not everyone's favorite player, but it'd be great to see him come back as a World Cup
Brazil
winner.
Will certainly take beating at that. Brazil are a very, very good team. But the reason that I'm looking at South America for it is the weather, the heat, the humidity, the climate. And you're dead right with Spain. If there is going to be a European side that have an opportunity, I think Spain and Portugal will probably be somewhat vested in terms of the temperatures.
Yeah, definitely. They'd be more kind of suited to the climate and stuff like that. Look at teams like England and Wales. I think in the latter stages they might actually struggle with the humidity and stuff like that. But yeah, look, Shaun's gone with Argentina. I'm going to go opposite. I'm going to go Brazil just because I've said that Ronaldo is the GOAT. I had to stick by my guns with that, even though, like, look at the carry on him the last couple of weeks is kind of put him down my estimation. But I've just gone too far with that argument.
Okay.
But look, on that note, we will wrap it up. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening in and who are listening on the replay as well. And look, hope everyone has a good week. And look, we will do a review of the first round of World Cup games at the end of the week as well. So do check that out later on the week. But thanks very much, Shaun, for coming on as well. And look, we'll see you next week.